morning. Muy buenos días. My name is Bea de la Torre. I am the Managing Director for Housing and Homelessness at Trinity Church, Wall Street. And I am so incredibly pleased to be here today moderating this incredible panel of meeting the Adams administration, including, of course, starting from my left, the Commissioner of the Department of Social Services, Commissioner Gary Jenkins, Chief Housing Officer Jessica Katz, the Commissioner of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, Adolfo Carrión, and the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Commissioner Ashwin Vasan. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to everyone in the audience. The way we're going to structure this panel is we're going to first hear from all of the commissioners and Chief Housing Officer directly. Then I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to leave the last 20 minutes or so for questions from you all. So start thinking about what you want to ask, and I do please ask that you ask a question and not just make a statement. But we'll get to that. So instead of me reading their incredible bios, which you all have seen, and they're all on the website, we thought it would be better to have each of the commissioners and the Chief Housing Officer to talk about themselves. So specifically, some background, but really we want to hear what really drives you to this work, what's your vision for the next 4 years, and how do you see specifically supportive housing as part of the city's plan to address the homelessness and housing insecurity crisis in New York City? In addition to that, we wanted to throw in a fun question because it's always good to know a little bit personal something about everyone. So also tell us about your favorite movie. So with that, let's start with Commissioner Jenkins.
Can you hear me? All right, I can hear myself. Good morning, everyone. Commissioner Gary Jenkins, as Bea said, I'm heading the Department of Social Services in New York City, and really proud, honored, and just blessed to serve in this role under the Adams administration, reporting directly into Deputy Mayor Williams Isom. What drives me for this type of work, it's my life passion. I've been with the agency, the Human Resources Administration, for over 30 years, and I wake up each and every morning with that desire, how can I help another neighbor in New York City? And that's always been my drive. And just a personal story, I grew up in Brooklyn, youngest child of 8 kids, single parent household. Wasn't easy for my mom as we grew up in receipt of public assistance, was homeless for a little over a year. So I always knew that I wanted to give back to my community. I always knew that I wanted to be part of a solution. So that's what drives me each and every day. And now to be the head of an agency that supported my family, I take pride in this role, but I also want to make a difference. And I say want to make a difference collectively with the wonderful team at DSS. We're going to make a difference. And that applies to the Human Resources Administration, our public benefits program portfolio, and the Department of Homeless Services. And we're going to make sure that we are listening and hearing from our partners in the field, but most importantly, hearing directly from folks who have lived experience, because that's how we're going to move the needle forward. So that's what drives me each and every day in the role that I'm playing in the Adams administration. And favorite movie, I have 3. So it's going to be hard, but to choose one. But I'm going to say The Best Man. Are you familiar with The Best Man? Okay. And real quick, and I'm going to say this real quick. My other is Sparkle. Are you familiar with Sparkle? And the last one is Love Jones. So you can tell that I'm a lover of themes as far as love stories, because there's always in the end, hopefully you're going to come out on top, and that's how I'm approaching this work. We're going to come out on top.
That's it.
Thank you so much for that. Commissioner Carrión?
Thank you, Beatriz. Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here and to be part of this wonderful team that Mayor Adams has put together. When I hear the question, how did you get here? I think about the talking heads. My God, how did I get here? Letting the days go by. It's been quite a journey, I have to say. I was a school teacher in the 1980s, the mid-80s, on 184th Street between Morris and Walton Avenue at the old Middle School 115. It was the Elizabeth Barrett Browning Middle School. Before that, it was Bronx Community College, and my mom was a student there as a working mom. But I met the chair of the Architecture and Engineering School at City College. He was chair of that program, Professor Salvadori, a little pint-sized, 3.5-foot Jewish Argentinian. And he was a firebrand. And he was also a professor at Columbia University and chair of this and that. But he turned me on to urban planning, to the idea of creating a physical city that makes sense for people and allows them to thrive. And that was my trigger. And that took me to get a master's degree in urban planning, to work at the Department of City Planning, to become a district manager, to run for city council, to run for the borough presidency of the Bronx. The Bronx story is an amazing story. We can get into that. But all of that led to other things in my life that ultimately, including working with President Obama at the White House, coming back and being the HUD regional administrator, I never got enough, right? And then starting my own business and working on affordable housing from the private side, working with nonprofits, working with for-profit developers. And here we are with an amazing opportunity to make a huge difference, like Gary said, in a moment of crisis. And every crisis presents us with opportunities to excel. I play golf, and when I hit it in the woods, I often joke with my golf mates. I said, guys, don't worry about it. This is an opportunity to excel. I'm going to hit it back on the fairway and try to get on the green. We're coming out of the woods now. We have faced an incredible global pandemic that put the brakes on our economy and killed many of our neighbors and fellow Americans. And now we've just got to roll up our sleeves and work together. Pretty soon you'll hear from our chief housing officer about our housing blueprint. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be working in New York, back in public service. My focus for the next 4 years is to steer the ship of HPD and make sure that we produce affordable housing, preserve our existing naturally occurring affordable housing stock that's, where the majority of New York renters live, and we've got to invest in preservation, to work with an amazing team of professionals at HPD. I discovered, as the incoming commissioner, that there are incredibly dedicated, amazing public servants at HPD. They hustle, they work, they don't mind the clock, they don't look at it, they stay late, they come early. We're touching base on the weekends. These people understand the concept of service. And so we're going to work really hard over the next 4 years. You'll hear some more a little bit later about our priorities as we lay them out. And then, in terms of my favorite movie, I didn't expect that. So I don't know, you might find this weird, but my favorite movie of all time is Papillon. Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, Devil's Island. The French safecracker that gets framed for murder and sent to this island off the coast of South America. You know that movie? It's really about the resiliency of the human spirit and never giving up. So, Papillon, we're not giving up.
Before we move on, I want to give a chance for the people in the back. There are a few seats up here if you want to come up. No? Okay, well, make your way if you would like. Okay, so next up, Chief Housing Officer Jessica Katz.
Thanks, Bea. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. As many of you know, supportive housing was where I spent most of my career, so I love coming home to the network conference and getting to see all my friends that I've worked with for so long. What drives me in the, I always wanted to do direct service. That was I wanted to be a special ed teacher or a social worker. And I'm really in awe of all of you who are here who do that work. I'm sort of a groupie of the direct service world, but it turned out that I cry too easily, so that was not to be. So I was not cut out for that job, but I really did want to stay in the mix in the social services world. So I was really excited when midway through college, I discovered supportive housing as even a concept and got an internship at a supportive housing provider early in college and never left. So I stayed with that. I was really grateful to have found that early and be able to find a field where I could pursue my passion, but also be able to work in a mode that was better for my skill set, shall we say. And having been, this is my third stint in government and the third mayoral administration that I've worked for. And I keep coming back because it just feels like there's more to be done, and I want to make sure that I'm a part of it. I think I was grateful to a certain extent to have not been in government during the worst of the pandemic, and that was not to be my, fate decided that was not my war to be in the trenches during that period of time. But I also did feel like once I had the opportunity, I did spend that period of time in the advocacy world and kind of telling everybody what they were doing wrong. And so when there was an opportunity to come back in and really get my hands dirty and fix it myself, I felt like a real obligation to that and to really make sure that I had the opportunity. And that feels like a really amazing honor. And I think that the vision that I think all four of us are really aligned on is really to center the people that we're serving in the process and make sure that they have a voice directly, and to really make that the hallmark of what the Adams administration is going to do in terms of homelessness, in terms of housing, in terms of public housing, and really to listen to a new group of people as we move forward. So I think that's important to me as we move forward with this. Movie, that's a good question. It has been a long time since I saw a movie that wasn't Encanto. That one I know very well. Maybe sounds like some of you have heard of it. I think it used to be that Dustin Hoffman movie, Outbreak, and now I can definitely never watch that ever again. So I'm going to say Inside Man. I like a Denzel heist movie.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's a good
Very
I
good.
can watch anytime.
Very good. Well, we will not talk about Bruno here today. It's okay. Commissioner Vasan.
Mic's on? Okay, it is on. Good morning, everybody. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It's a pleasure to be with you today talking about something other than COVID, though I'm sure we will be talking about COVID. You may be asking, you've got a housing commissioner, you've got a social service commissioner, you've got a chief housing officer, you've got all of you who work in housing. What am I doing here? Housing is health. I'm a doctor. I'm interested in saving lives, preventing suffering, and I've spent my career focused on those issues abroad and here in New York City. And housing is health. Housing is not only health, it's a fundamental human right. And when, I say those words intentionally because when you call something a human right, it obliges all of us collectively, as well as the state, in our case, the city, to do everything we can to ensure that it is a right experienced and shared by all. And so that's the frame with which I come to this. I spent the first 10 years of my career working in HIV globally. And the work that I did was about ensuring that some of the most vulnerable people in the world, in places like rural Lesotho and Rwanda and Haiti and elsewhere, could not only get access to, but to remain on life-saving treatments for HIV, which were, at that point, only available here in the global north. And if you start to do that work, you realize that the ability to stay on your medications, the ability to go visit your doctor and keep your appointments, the ability to manage your complications, that the ups and downs of living with the chronic illness is very much affected by the quality and the conditions in which you live every day. And so that was my first taste of housing as a human right, working for an organization called Partners in Health, I wondered, why were we building housing for people? I thought we ran medical clinics. I learned very early on in my career that life-saving intervention was much more than me prescribing a pill or us in white coats doing something in a medical facility. It was about the majority of the time, the 23 hours and 30 minutes, as I like to say, that people spend outside of the walls of our healthcare system on any given day. And so that's really where I come to this work from. I'm a practicing primary care doctor and up in Washington Heights, and of course over the years I've seen an incredible number of people who are either housing unstable or actively unhoused. And the impact, and frankly the powerlessness you feel at times as a clinician to actually move the needle on this issue, it certainly redoubled my efforts to lean into it as a social determinant of health and to get read up on and schooled on by all of you housing policy. And then most recently, I ran a community-based organization, which runs over 400 units of supportive housing for people with serious mental illness around New York City. And so I got a firsthand taste, especially through a pandemic, of how life-saving an intervention supportive housing is and how challenging it can be to get into supportive housing, to stay in supportive housing, and the interdependence of that stability with stable health care, stable access to health care, and particularly for that population, for this population, people with serious mental illness, the ability to remain connected and out of social isolation. So that's the work that that's the experience I bring to this work. At the department, as many of you know, we run many of the supportive housing contracts in the city, and we're committed to ensuring that the services that people get in our supportive housing infrastructure really meets their holistic health and social needs, that they get access to clinical care, that they get access to benefits through HRA and with Gary's team, and that we're centering their health and well-being in the process because we know that the interdependence of those issues. And so I'm very excited to be working for an administration that is bringing those worlds together, that has a chief housing officer, that isn't treating these issues as siloed and independent, that isn't letting each agency run its own sort of programs and separate entities that are affecting the same people and converging on the lives of the same folks who are marginalized and vulnerable, but rather under Jessica's leadership and with the help of the mayor, really bringing us all together to a unified vision. I couldn't have imagined entering this work how complex the world of supportive housing is. The layers upon layers of laws and administration and good, well-intended, but built on top of each other over decades. And what I'm very, very proud is that Jessica and the team and our team will contribute as much as we can to ensuring that despite that we're working to increase efficiency, increase access, increase quality of services, and really center people's health, center people's well-being, and really meet their needs. And so just very proud to be here today with all of you, to learn from you, to hear you, and to really see what we as an agency can do to meet the moment. So thank you so much.
You're not going to be off the hook, Commissioner Vasan. We need to know your favorite movie.
The movie. I tend, the work I do is one could classify as heavy. So I tend to watch movies that are escapist. Encanto is on the list. I have 3 little ones. I did watch Goodfellas over the weekend in honor of Ray Liotta. I was up late. And so I don't know what that says about my view on city government. A lot of people get whacked in that movie. A lot of people get whacked in that movie. But we'll see. Sharp elbows.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, including your favorite movie. I kind of feel like we should do a housing movie club after this. There's so many good ones out there. Okay, so let's really get started with some of the questions that we have for you. And of course, we have to start with the top one that we're all thinking about, which is related to the housing plan. So, Chief Katz, you can start. Can you tell us the timeline, the priorities, anything you can tell us about the housing plan? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. The timeline is soon. I'm here, so that just took a little bit away from the timeline, but I will tell you I was in the office until midnight last night, so the timeline is soon. As you all know, the supportive housing is my home base always, and is the proven answer to why I got into housing and why the ways in which we can address homelessness. So that will definitely have a central role. And I also think, as my colleagues have said, we have over the years, and I've been a part of this too, have created new requirements and rules and forms and procedures, but we never seem to take any away. So I also want to make sure we've taken a couple stabs at this in previous years. About 10 years ago, there was a group of us that, with the help of Community Solutions, went to Chicago. There's a bunch of Gail was there, Jennifer Kelly was there, Mike was there. Was a group of us that were there, and we did put a certain amount of energy into trying to streamline the process and streamline the system. But at the time, there was this. There were these separate silos at City Hall. And so when the agencies all look at each other and say, my process is fine, it's your process is not going great, and because these processes are so complicated and we've created so many different systems and rules over this period of time, and as all of us who just came in and are getting memos from our teams describing and process mapping what the process is, your head kind of starts to spin. And I think in those previous times that we've attempted to streamline the system, there really wasn't the sustained attention and stubbornness from City Hall that it takes in order to move that kind of process forward, because it does take a lot of coordination across the agencies and adjudicating amongst the agencies who's actually the one who's standing in the way of any particular thing. So I'm having been through that on the agency side for many years and having a reputation for stubbornness, I feel like pretty excited and optimistic that we'll be able to get somewhere this time. So that's another important keystone, I think, that relates to supportive housing of what will be in the housing plan.
Great, thank you. And we're going to talk a lot more about processes and maybe get a little bit more nitty-gritty in that. But Commissioner Carrión, you want to comment on the housing plan?
Yeah, just briefly. I'm most excited about decalcifying, unclogging, streamlining, cleaning up a lot of the mess. I mean, I think it's been described across here as sort of layer upon layer upon layer. We create a rule, a regulation, a process, and then we put another one on top of it. And then we put more forms on it. And then new deadlines and other agencies that should chime in and say something. That also happens in the production, on the production side. We have a process that the mayor has set up, and you all know Melanie LaRocca is leading it with Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. Oh, and speaking of deputy mayors, Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom is here, who's also part of the decalcification team. I see so many emails coming in from you about, cleaning this up, and let's get to it. But I'm excited about that. And the other piece of this is having one plan for housing. The housing experience is just the housing experience in New York. We need to tie it all together, and we need to address all of the pieces. So whether you're a renter, whether you own a co-op or a condo, if you are or want to be a homeowner, we need to be there for you. We need to give you affordable options. If you have mental health issues, if you are not housed, if you are barely housed, we need to be there for you. And it has to be a continuum. There has to be a plan that ties it all together. And that's the most exciting thing for me, which is having been a customer on the other side, our aim is to make it more user-friendly, to do housing and to live in housing in New York.
That's great. And that is music, I think, to all of our ears. And with that, Commissioner, it's a perfect setup for you to talk about how you're integrated into the housing plan.
Yeah, just Commissioner Carrión said, under this administration, just having two separate plans did not make any sense to us. Having a housing plan and a homelessness plan, the road to becoming housed, right, is housing. So when Jessica and I had a conversation and I spoke with Deputy Mayor Williams-Isom, it was like it does not make sense to have two separate plans. So talking about working together and collaboratively, we came to the point where it was like, let's have one plan, because these are shared clients with their unique challenges, and we're looking at it and approaching it as, let's look at the individual, address their challenges, but in the end, let's get them housed, because that's going to solve homelessness. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So just going through that process of listening to others, and Jessica mentioned it earlier, we sit down with folks who have real lived life experience and listen to them, put them in a round table, speak with you all who are on the ground, right, because you interact with this population all of the time. Let's talk, let's listen, and then let's react to it, and let's put it into motion. So I'm really excited about working with DOHMH, working with HPD, working with DHS, and working with HRA. And we are talking to one another, but also more importantly, listening to what you're saying, and so we can put it into action.
Great. And Commissioner Vasan, can you also comment on how health is being integrated into the housing plan?
Yes, I think we're focused on meeting people's needs inside housing. One of the things, as a supportive housing provider over the last several years, but also as a doctor, I never really understood the attitude of someone's readiness for housing. You're not ready for housing. You deserve housing. You might face other intersecting challenges that you need to deal with, but you should do that while housed under a roof, right? You shouldn't be expected to do that while living unstably or transitioning through setting to setting or on the street, and expecting different outcomes without addressing that fundamental issue is somewhat magical thinking, I would say. And so we're focused on, at the health department, on partnering with our sister agencies and really figuring out how do we ensure that the community-based organizations we work with and the health department directly provides the kinds of services inside of supportive housing and around supportive housing that meet people's health needs and that enhance their ability to live stably inside housing, to manage their intersecting social needs. And I think that's reflected well in the plan. There is a lot of complexity to the way these contracts work, to the way that we support providers, and even this, I think the word stubbornness is right. You just have to keep at it and work against that complexity and not just get fatigued, because it is fatiguing when you look at it, and when you look at the reams of paper and regulation. I can only imagine, I have seen over the last several years working with members of Fountain House how fatiguing it can be for the consumer, for the client, for the member, for the person. And so the commitment and the stubbornness to chip away at that so that the user experience is better, and that we're actually starting with getting everyone housed, not creating health bars or social service bars to make them prepared for housing, but say, get you housed and we'll work on the other stuff too. And so certainly from the health department side, we're committed to that.
Thank you for that. So let's talk about New York 1515, and any of you can jump in as you want to chime in. So specifically, can you give us an update on the progress, any lessons learned, any evaluation results that you can share, and then what would you tweak moving forward if you could? So I open it up.
So let me start. I'm glad to be back in government, or back in school, to be a student again. I'm learning a lot. I'm still looking for the water fountains in the bathrooms at 100 Gold Street, and every once in a while I study a policy. But I have something on NYC 1515 in terms of progress and lessons learned. I want to share it with you. We just updated the rental subsidy program in response to what we've heard from tenants providers and our partner agencies in government. We're aiming to strike the delicate balance between a fair, implementable, and people-centric regulatory scheme, but we think we're making great strides there as well. Some specifics laid out in the rental subsidy program include formalizing a clearer subsidy reinstatement policy. I know that means a lot to a lot of people in this room. We've updated the initial rent policies to be responsive to the realities new developments are facing. And we've made our 1515 occupancy standards policy and the list of populations we serve more flexible. So writ large, we need to invest in the technology to provide and communicate subsidy services effectively to vulnerable tenants. And to that end, we are working this year to kick off numerous tech improvements to bring more of our process online. Just the beginning of what we are trying to do to create and maximize our tools for serving our most vulnerable populations. This is an important program that's aged and aging, and I'm, as commissioner, committed to working in partnership with you all to take these important lessons from the field and your experience and apply them to the program. So you can count on that from this commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? 15,
From the health department side, just in terms of a progress update on 1515, there have been over 2,000 units, supportive housing units in contract with our agency, with DOHMH, under 1515. The number, I think, is 2,116 to be exact. Some of the lessons learned, I think, 1515 reduced some of the distinctions in the populations eligible for supportive housing and tried to move towards more flexible service delivery models. The system really does need to be built on that kind of flexibility as the needs of individuals and families change over time. A perfect example is just the needs of aging children as they move through developmental stages, and parents need different housing arrangements, sizes of housing, so on and so forth. That has previously been challenging, and 1515 has at least started the process of working on making that more flexible. The fiscal separation of funding for services and operations, distinct budgeting processes in 1515 allows, I think, providers to maintain some consistency of services. We found that certainly at Fountain House when we ran supportive housing, is that budgeting was somewhat helpful. I think that was an improvement upon prior funding models where services and operations were combined and providers were often put in a position of reducing funding for services to cover rising rent or maintenance costs on the infrastructure side. And as you well know, before 1515, there was no built-in funding increase for the rental portion of supportive housing, and so it left providers to obviously cover those gaps, and it left rates frozen in time, even while landlords attempted to raise rent. And the 2% rent escalator within 1515 is certainly a step towards maintaining scattered site units, though we know that this may not meet the full needs of maintaining those units, and this is an incredibly high-cost housing market. And so I would say progress, not perfection, when it comes to 1515, but we have started to see some tangible movement.
I would add in, from the DSS side of the house, we are looking at our placement and referral process and meeting with a lot of you in this room, appreciate the partnership, because we are learning from you, again, on what are the barriers and what can we eliminate to ensure that our population are being properly referred and placed into these units. So when we talk about CAPS, the CAPS tracks over 26,000 units and hundreds of housing placements citywide. We're looking at, under Ryan Murray and Mike Bosca's leadership, how do we improve that process? What else can we add in to make it easier for us to identify eligible populations to be placed into these units? So this is really looking, again, and working with all of you and the fabulous team that works with me. Where are the opportunities to move folks in to these units in a seamlessness manner? Working with, on the DHS side, we have our population that's in shelter, and we know, through identification that they are eligible for these 15 units. And working with our housing providers to move folks out of shelter into these units, it's critical, and we're laser focused on that process, but we're also laser focused on how do we improve the process.
And if I can follow up on that, Commissioner Jenkins, maybe, you mentioned CAPS, which is so incredibly important. Seems like there's some improvement coming. Can you give an update on that?
Sure. We're looking at how do we expand the number of housing programs in the system. And a number of you we are working with to get to that end goal. Because as I said, we track over 26,000 units, but there's always room for improvement. So we're working with our IT department to determine how do we improve on that system? How do we increase that system so that we can work with individuals and work with you all on how to move that needle forward. So within CAPS, we'll continue to look and explore how can we improve.
Great, thank you. So I know there's some affordable housing and supportive housing developers here, and I'm sure you all want to know what the plan is for the public sites and in the housing plan, if there is a plan to allocate some of those public sites specifically for supportive housing, and if you want to share any upcoming RFPs that we should be looking out for, please go ahead and do so.
He's trying to get me in trouble. I think, honestly, what strikes me the most when you ask that question is that when I first started coming to this conference, we would never have dreamed of doing a public RFP for a supportive housing site. We just never would have thought that we could get through the public process. We just wouldn't. I think the first one that we did was I started HPD in 2003, and at that point, I don't think we had done one on a public site, even though at that point, HPD had thousands of public sites, because we were so afraid that communities were going to run us out of town. And it's a really huge credit to everybody in this room that now we're talking about how many more public sites can we do ULURPs on for supportive housing, and that's like a generation of education of elected officials, education of community boards, all of you going to community boards and really doing the hard work of explaining to people what supportive housing is and what it's not, and then also looping back when the building is open so that to really show people that their worst fears were not realized. So I think the next frontier of that for me is making sure that our actual tenants and actual homeless people and formerly homeless people are really leading the charge on that. And we're really seeing that come to fruition as well, where we're seeing people with lived experience really taking the lead. So it's not these intermediaries of people who are working in the direct service world who are taking charge on that. So I think it's pretty remarkable that we've gotten to the point where we have the supportive RFQ, we have H&H sites that we're doing supportive housing on, we have tons of HPD sites that we have done ULURPs on. So that's just, I think in itself, that's really something important to celebrate.
Great, thank you.
And I'll just add that, of the city-owned land, the HPD share of that portfolio is about 800 vacant lots. And 3/4 of them are already either in an RFP or have a plan for development. And that leaves a couple of hundred sites. There are a good number of sites that are undevelopable, at least for the purposes of our mission as an agency. And so that's where we will collaborate very aggressively with other agencies to try to answer their needs. And, all of this is done in a planning process with the host communities that we serve. And I like to use that term host community because we come in to where people live, and they're hosting us. And so we need to be in a conversation our Office of Neighborhood Strategies, led by Deputy Commissioner Ahmed Tegani, which many of you know, works very closely with neighborhoods all across the city, with nonprofits all across the city, with mission-driven developers all across the city. Our Office of Development, that's now led by Kim Darga as the acting Deputy Commissioner. And I think both Kim and maybe Brendan McBride are here, somewhere in the room. They're back there, okay. A lot of the HPD team is here, but just imagine 800 properties. It's a lot of opportunity. So, look out as those RFPs roll out.
That's exciting. So we have a housing plan coming out really soon, RFPs, looking out for all of that. So let's talk about coordination with the state. So we hear that the coordination with the state maybe it's a little easier now than it had been in previous years, and we also know that successful coordination with the state is absolutely key to success for everything we're trying to do. So can you comment on that, and also specifically which priorities have you put at the top of the list? And you should know we're asking the same question of the state commissioners in the panel later on.
I want a transcript of that. It really, coordination with the state, it really comes from the top, and that's been remarkable. So on the one hand, we're on a personal level, on a professional level, we've all worked with our counterparts at the state for many years in various positions. But I do have to say that when things were really, really bad between a mayor and a governor, there's even like a very long-term friendship and long professional relationship. It's often not enough to overcome that kind of structural political problem. So there's people who I'd worked with for years and for decades and I'm friends with, and it's still, when the mayor and the governor are sniping at each other, it becomes very hard to work in a collegial way and really get stuff done collaboratively. So that was, I found working over multiple administrations, that often those kind of personal relationships that I have on the ground are scarily not enough to overcome that kind of political landscape. So I'm feeling very, very grateful now to be working in an environment where the city and the state are working together collaboratively, and then now those relationships are valuable and we can work together across those silos. I apologize for constantly checking my phone, but it's a big day in Albany today. So I've been up there weekly working with our state partners to really make sure that we get some of our housing priorities through. So we're hopeful for a big day today and tomorrow, and also very relieved to be able to actually just do our jobs and not have it kind of under the shadow of this other stuff.
That's right.
And I would just add on, it is a wonderful day in New York State to have a mayor and a governor who are actually working together. And it's really refreshing in the sense that I can pick the phone up, I can call the commissioner for OTDA, Dan Teets, and he actually gets New York City, right? He actually understands our challenges. It's like, okay, how do we work towards, removing those barriers? So it's really, we're in a really good space, and I appreciate the collaboration. Even with the eShy units, it's really focused on how do we move folks out of our DHS system into these vacant units. And it's working well. So to have that openness and to know that we have this same shared vision is really refreshing.
Let me just quickly say that Ruth Ann and I are best friends. And we're actually good longtime friends, but now that we're commissioners at the state and city level, it gives us an opportunity to really work well together. We talk all the time. I'm sure that she's saying exactly the same thing that I'm saying right now in her room. But I just want to share with you, and we do meet regularly, formally and informally. But I want to share with you examples of 3 collaborations, because we do several bond deals a year. We collaborate on the 9% tax credit deals on a regular basis. We just a few weeks ago had breakfast and recommitted to let's get our agency people together and let's enhance our subsidy capacity together and do deals in the city together. More deals, but 3 examples. Logan Fountain, DHS Shelter Permanent Supportive Housing co-located project in East New York. I don't know if anybody's associated with that is here. That's a great project. The other one is Bridge Rockaway. It's a mixed-use development that combines supportive housing with a 20,000 square foot light industrial space, which brings back jobs to the Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn. Congratulations, folks, associated with that. You're getting a free commercial. Next time you have to pay for it. Star Hill, it's a large supportive housing development in the Bronx, my home borough, featuring a publicly accessible park space and a pretty sizable community facility. But those are just three very recent examples from the past few months of projects that we've completed together with the state of New York.
That's really exciting. Thank you for sharing. So this next question is for Commissioner Jenkins and Commissioner Vasan. If you could please talk about the continuum of services that exist at the intersection of behavioral health and homelessness, so what kind of programs are available, and also really importantly, how do we keep the right case management services tied to the person as they move through the system towards housing? You know, that handoff that I know we all want, but so many times, like, the system breaks.
Sure, that's a great question. And I'm just going to speak from the Department of Homeless Services side. And I have the Administrator, Jocelyn Carter, here, and the First Deputy Commissioner, Molly Park, which you all should know, and if you don't know, you should get to know them before you leave. But on the DHS side, we have a robust set of services for individuals with mental health and or substance issues. So we have specific shelters that cater to this population. We have a robust set of services on site that address those concerns, and through case management, through our housing assistance. But then also we need to do a referral service within the communities. We provide that as well. We make sure that we really are meeting the individuals where they are. Right, that's important because we are each an individual with our own challenges, and yes, we all have challenges, including myself. So to sit down with those individuals and have the staff there with the expertise, working with Dr. Vasan and his team to really take that person through the process while they're in our system, but more importantly, right, is once they get into housing. How do we continue that aftercare? Because you can't, have that captive person and provide the services and then let them go, right? It's like aftercare is so important, and I'm speaking with, and I keep mentioning her name. She's probably going to hit me when we leave. My deputy mayor she really holds us, to like, hey, think holistically. They're in our system now, and that's great. But what happens when they leave? How are we paying attention to them? And it's just great to have colleagues that we can collaborate with to say, okay, Gary, they're in your system. They're with, with Jocelyn Carter. We're giving them the services that they deserve, but what happens afterwards? And then that's when, we work with our colleagues across the city to ensure that aftercare is being paid attention to as well.
Even on the weekends, he calls me.
Even on the weekends, days, nights.
What's a weekend?
And you know why?
What's a weekend?
Yeah, Jessica also, because our clients deserve it, right? That's why we're in these positions. They deserve the attention.
What's a weekend, right?
Ashwin has never heard of a weekend.
Yeah, what's a weekend, Gary?
Yeah.
Look, again, I come to this work as a clinician, as a provider, as a public health person, and you're often scratching your head as to why services for people with mental health needs and behavioral health needs in housing are somehow different than the services they need outside of housing, right? They're the same. They're the same needs. They're the same person. And so a lot of the work we do in close collaboration with Commissioner Jenkins and his team is to try to break down those walls. Yes, funding streams can create those silos, and a lot of those funding streams come from our partners at different levels of government at the state and the federal government. The fact that we've got those open channels of communication, certainly I do with Commissioner Sullivan and with Commissioner Bassett, to talk about these issues is so encouraging and so positive because they see the same issues on their end. We obviously through OMH contracts, through Office of Mental Health contracts, provide that support to our colleagues at DHS in the sphere of street outreach, really ensuring that people who are experiencing street homelessness are getting into shelter, mental health shelters, drop-in centers that can start the process of connecting them to case management. And to your point, how does that case management follow through? I think that that's something we need to work on, and I think that that's something that we're committed to strengthening. What I have found in my experience as a supportive housing provider also is that often you all in the community-based organizations are the folks following people through different settings. And the more we can do to support care management and case management services at your organizations through vendor contracts and so forth, the longer those relationships can be. The city can really step in certain acute moments, and they certainly are good at providing infrastructure. We're good at providing infrastructure, but it's that longitudinal relationship, community building, and connection to an organization that you all often provide, and certainly I was on that end over the last several years. Separate and apart from that, we do a number of things directly in the space of serious mental illness to ensure that people are getting connected to the services they need through our single point of access, which basically is a way to coordinate what can be quite a complex system of services for people experiencing severe mental illness at different stages in their acuity, recovery, needs, crisis, and so forth. And about 30% of the people who come into the SPOA are people experiencing active homelessness at the time of their referral. And it determines about the eligibility for services for about 5,000 people in specialty care, with a whole range of providers. And so we're working to ensure that SPOA is easy to access, that the platform is easy for providers, and much in the same way that we're doing with CAPS, making sure that folks feel like that's a good and user-friendly experience. Lastly, I'll just talk about a couple of teams, kind of more intensive supports for people in the throes of serious mental illness. Those are our IMT teams, our intensive mobile treatment teams, which was created in 2016 to provide mental health and substance use treatment in a very intensive way with mobile psychiatry to support people living with really complex life situations, transient living situations, often with a lot of criminal legal system involvement. And they're staffed by substance use clinicians, mental health clinicians, and peers. And we've seen really good results from these teams since as of up to date, as of the end of 2021, about 35% of people ever served by an IMT team who were unhoused at the time of their initial connection to an IMT team are now stably and permanently housed. So, work to do, but at least we know that intensity of services for a subset of people can have good and permanent effects. The last thing I'll highlight is our shelter partner assertive community treatment teams, SPAC teams, which was created by the state, OMH, in 2017 to provide mental health and substance use services to shelter-based individuals experiencing serious mental illness. And it's really can be, I think we all know that the shelters can be a challenging environment to provide services to people with complex behavioral health needs, but we've seen fairly good results in connecting people to those SPAC teams as a step down, for example, from inpatient psychiatric care, as a step up from traditional outpatient care, people who are in that kind of window where if we don't catch them with intensive services, they could decompensate further or have a regression, basically recovery and then regression of their illness. And so we've connected, since 2017, we've connected about 330 homeless individuals to SPAC teams and working to increase that number. So we have more to do, but those are just a couple of examples that we're proud of. And I know that the housing plan is committed to kind of really supporting that work.
Thank you. And actually, so on that point specifically, for people experiencing homelessness that are unsheltered, are there plans to connect them directly to permanent supportive housing?
So I could jump in. That happens right now, today. When we address our unsheltered individuals, it's really important that we engage and build that trust. And that's what the incredible team at DHS does each and every day, along with our providers. So it's important, once we connect and we build that trust, then we start and they go into one of our low barrier units. That gives us the opportunity to really work with that individual to get the documentation that they need in order to move them into, supportive housing. And I really want to stress that that's really critical in our work. And I know I'm preaching to the choir right now, but I'm going to preach a minute. Folks like, oh, you should take them straight from the street into supportive housing. For some, that is the appropriate route, right? Because homelessness is an individual approach. And I keep saying individual. I can become homeless tomorrow and don't need specific services, but others do. And others need assistance. And as a city government, we want to make sure that we are providing that assistance to those individuals. So it's working, again, to get the documentation that they need. And there's documentation, and we're working on that to ensure like what we have, we don't have to ask for again. But what we don't have, let's work with that individual to get them the documents that they need in order to move into supportive housing. But it also gives us an opportunity to provide the services that they require and that they deserve. So from going from unsheltered to a low barrier to supportive housing, that's always, if that's appropriate for them, if not other permanent housing, that's what we do each and every day.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about supportive housing vacancies. We've been reading and hearing a lot about this. A lot of you have this. Tell us where we are, what improvements have been done in the last few months, and what improvements you're going to be focused on in the next few.
I want to jump in again. It's really important, right? We understood it was 2,500 vacancies, and I'm going to say COVID played a role in that, and we understand that. And the team has been laser focused on really improving that method of how do we get the individuals into these vacant units. So that cohort of 2,500. Before I go into the numbers, I want my staff to please stand. Please stand, because they've been working so hard. Yep, Ryan, Mike, Jennifer, Tris, Jocelyn, Molly. Where's John Rojas? All right. So we've been working really hard, and not because we were mandated to work that hard, right? Our clients deserve it, and we took it seriously when we recognized and saw like, hey, it's 2,500 vacant units. We're coming out of COVID. Folks are now willing to, because it's client choice as well. Don't forget that. It's client's choice, right? Because you can show me a unit, and I may not want that unit. Right? So we are working with individuals who's in our system to show them and educate them on the benefits of moving into the vacant units. So the 2,500, we have less than 1,600 ready placed units available in our system. It went from 2,500 in April to now 1,600. And we're working on the 1,600, right? We're working on those to fill, but it also is the collaboration of all of you. So I know with my team, and I know it was just a little probably annoying, but again, our clients deserve my annoying because we are public servants. And we really looked at the processes, and we looked at what are the barriers and how do we break them down, and how do we show the clients the benefits of moving in. So we created a video, right? The video should be out shortly to show like this is the benefits of moving into a supportive housing unit. We've worked with a lot of you in this room on a weekly basis to say, how do we improve our referral process? Before, it was maybe like for one unit, we referred one person. We increased that. Now there's 3 folks to 1 unit. And we did that because we really wanted to give the client that choice, but also to ensure that we had the capacity to fill those units, because again, it's always client's choice. So hopefully the first person show up, they're eligible because we're making the referral, they should move in. If Gary Jenkins shows up, I don't want that unit, I have Mike Bosket right behind me, If Mike says he doesn't want that unit, I have John Rojas right behind me to accept that unit. So hopefully out of the 1 in 3 rule, someone's going to get that unit. So we're laser focused. We're not turning away. Of course, we want every unit filled. So the DHS team is working with the HRA team. We're not working in silo. We're working with our colleagues also in DOHMH and HPD to make sure we get it right and we get it done.
And I also want to add to that this is such a perfect example of why leadership really matters and the ways in which in government you really get what you measure. So I know we talk a lot about administrative burdens and bureaucracy. A good bureaucracy is beautiful. I'm an agency girl. A good bureaucracy is exactly what we need in order to get this done. And frankly, the bureaucracies weren't being asked the question, how many vacancies are there? We didn't measure it before. We didn't measure how long it takes to move into supportive housing. We measured how perfect is this package of paperwork. That's what we were measuring our staff against, and that's what they were delivering in a wonderful way. That meant time. Now, if we're actually going to look at, and I'm completely confident that once we start measuring how many vacancies we have and how much time it takes, that we know that these agencies and these amazing teams know how to deliver that. But that is not what we were asking for in the past. And I'm also struck by how much stigma still to this day, even among all of us who do this work every day, exists around homelessness, where we've forgotten what to classify as an emergency. So my first week on the job was the Bronx fire. And it was a tough way to start a new. It was a tough way to start a new job, and it was a tough way to start an administration, and it was a million times more tough and tragic for the families who experienced that fire. But we really moved heaven and earth to make sure that those families were rehoused quickly. And I'm very proud of the work that we did when we made a lot of really big policy changes on the fly to make sure that those families got rehoused as quickly as humanly possible. But I'm also that also made me think how much more routine we see the process of housing families in some of our other shelter systems at times. So we've kind of made decisions about who's homeless for a good reason or a bad reason, or a reason that's their fault or a reason that's not their fault, or a reason that we treat as an emergency and what we treat as not an emergency. So it takes some time to kind of really rewire your brain to what feels like an emergency, because there's so much coming at all of you in your day jobs on any given day, and certainly at the city agencies, you do have to have a certain level of detachment. And again, I'll get back to why I was a horrible social worker. But I do think that turning us on our head about what we treat as an emergency and what we're measuring in terms of the performance of the agencies, we will absolutely get there. And I think that's the number one reason why all of us are focused here today.
Yeah, great. I just want to quickly, in the theme of vacancies, talk about the staff vacancies at some of the agencies. So maybe Commissioner Carrión, the New York Housing Conference, I see Rachel in the back, just released a really good report in the staffing shortages. Could you just quickly comment on what the plan is to address that?
Thank you, Beatriz. So I think if you've been on a Zoom, Teams, WebEx with me over the last 3 months, or you've heard me speaking at a hearing or speaking somewhere, you've heard me talk about rebuilding HPD. We've lost hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people, inspectors, project managers, attorneys. The global pandemic really impacted everybody, including government, all workers. It made people kind of it forced an existential question about what the heck am I doing? How did I get here? Oh my God, how did I get here? What have I been doing and for how long? And why do I do things the way I've done them? For city workers and HPD in particular, we lost people who, in that moment, said, gee, are there better options for me? Is there better pay, better working conditions, And many of them took the leap. And, the other issue for our agency is that we're a great training ground for professionals in real estate, right? And so the lawyers learn a lot about deals, and they're complicated deals. So they learn it from day one. They jump in, we throw them in, and it's like, figure it out and come back with the right solution. And they work in teams. The project managers, young project managers come in, and I saw a few of them walking around today. They're developers because they figured out the formula, right? So we're a great training guy. We're an incubator, you know. We start businesses at HPD. So we've lost a lot of people. We're aggressively hiring. This council and the mayor, the mayor has been great on the budget for us. We're looking at 77 new positions and then backfilling several hundred. And, you know, Jessica mentioned, you know, those first days on the job in Twin Parks, which brings up that whole issue of health and safety and our inspector corps. And we're budgeted for several hundred, and we've got more than 120 vacancies just among inspectors. We're working very closely with DCAS. We're having job fairs. We could use your help even in recruiting young people that are interested in jobs. But we're aggressively recruiting. People are spending a lot of time interviewing people, and I think we're gonna be in great shape in a couple of months. So stay tuned.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to do one last very quick flash round, but I am giving you all a heads up that right after that, we're going to move into questions from you all. So think about your question. Again, keep it a question, please, and keep it short. And then we can line up in the microphone, and if somebody needs us to bring the microphone to them, please let me know. So quick flash round. Many times you don't really get to talk to the end user of the programs that you're running, you know, the housing that you're producing. If you were to tell that person a message of what you're doing and what's driving you for this work and what you want to achieve, what would that be? Let's start with Commissioner Jenkins.
We are serving with care and compassion, and that's period. So that's all of our work when we interact with our clients, when we interact with our providers, when we interact with our partners, when we interact with City Hall. We're serving with care and compassion because in the center of it all are our clients.
Thank you. Commissioner Carrión.
The day that Jessica and I were, the announcement was made about our appointment, I used the phrase, people over process, people over paper. We're not a bricks and mortar agency. We are creating homes for individuals and families. That's our mission. And if you're a builder, a developer, a tenant, an aspiring homeowner, an existing homeowner, if you're homeless and need a place to live, we work for you. And it should be, and so HPD works for you and will be customer friendly. Easy to use. That's our goal.
I know you said we often don't get a chance to talk to our end user, but I think one really thing that I'm proud of about this administration is that we are doing that. And I think my highlight of my tenure on this job so far has been having 25 homeless and formerly homeless people sitting in City Hall, meeting with the mayor, letting him know their issues directly. And after that meeting, I said to him that I'm going to work my ass off to make sure that that meeting was not just symbolic, but that the symbol is really important too. But the lightning round answer is what I would say to them. What I have said to the homeless New Yorkers that we serve is, I know, I'm sorry, and we're going to fix it.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would just say to New Yorkers and much of what I would say to my patients, which is I understand that health is not just the absence of disease, and it is the ability to go proactively and live your life, to move about the world with a sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense of purpose, a sense of happiness. and a sense that your basic needs are met, but that you can also stay connected on the path to achieving your dreams. And that's health. When we really think about what health is, that's health. It's not health care, it's not services, it's not the interactions with any of our agencies. And so what I say to my patients is the same thing I would say as the city's doctor and as the head of this agency, which is we're here to help you live your healthiest life, and that means we need to do more in certain cases, and it means we need to get out of the way in other cases. And so that's our mission, and tell us what you need for that to become a reality.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. Okay, so we have some time for questions from the audience. Who's going to be the first person? Yes. And please maybe introduce yourself as well.
Sure, thank you. My name is Peter Rivera. I'm a partner at a law firm called Richter Restrepo. We are a minority, 100% minority-owned law firm, and we are MBE certified with the city and the state. And I just wanted to know from our distinguished panel, what is the city doing, the various agencies doing to help minority developers, minority firms to do more business with the city?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carrión.
Yes, this is a huge priority. We as a city have failed. We've had some success, very little success. This mayor is committed to engaging the minority and women-owned business enterprises. HPD is committed. The engagement has been lopsided. And I could explain that at another conference with a PowerPoint presentation about who's benefited from the minority and women business enterprise efforts of HPD, let alone other agencies. So we're going to make a concerted effort, Peter, to fully engage, especially the MBEs. And I say that with confidence and some risk, and that's okay. But we have not done the best that we can do, and this administration is committed to changing that. So we already have programs. I'm sure many of you know about them. We have a sort of inside HPD school, how to become a developer. We buy a lot of goods and services. We have a minority purchasing program. But inside that, there are some real problems about the beneficiaries of our efforts that have to be addressed. So, Peter, we're going to be very aggressive. We're going to be inviting folks in. The Latino and Black communities have not benefited the way that it was intended. And we're going to fix that.
And I would add, just from DSS perspective, we have open RFPs. I encourage the MWBEs to please go online, look at the opportunities, apply, because we are laser focused on MWBEs. We just had hosted a session, I believe it was last week or week before, where we invited MWBEs to come in so we can explain the process, because we recognize even some of the smaller MWBEs don't have the capacity to understand of like what to do and how to go about it. And you have the big players in the room, and and that's how they win the awards. But we want to make sure that we are engaging our MWBs as well. So please go online and look at those RFPs.
Thank you. There was another question. Yes, you. Yes.
Short people problems. Can you hear me? Okay, hi. My name is Nancy Hernandez. Oh, thank you. And I'm a program director for supportive housing for HeartShare St. Vincent Services. So my question is, what can we expect for the youths between the ages of 18 to 24 who are currently struggling with applying or being a part of the supportive housing bracket when they are discharged from foster care and been homeless all their life and experiencing the trauma and being able to say, I don't want to run away no more. I don't want to be evicted. I want to have my own home one day.
Great question. Who wants to answer that first? Great question. Thank you, Nancy.
I'll take it. So the youth and young adult population has been and continues to be, I think, one of the areas where we're learning the most, I'll say, about how to move forward with the right set of services. And part of the reason is because we're sort of treating them as like just younger than young adults and bigger than a kid, and not really looking at their specific needs and what that specific developmental moment feels like. And we really, for the most part, we really don't need to look any further than what our own experience was like at that age, even while it may be very different than some of the young adults that are served in supportive housing. In many ways, it's the same. I didn't wake up when I was 19 years old and go to visit an apartment and sign a lease and live by myself in a studio apartment. I had a bunch of roommates, and whoever, I don't know who's the person was, I don't know whose name was on the lease. Someone told me this room is X $100. I paid that person every month, and that changed from time to time. And there was like a rotating cast of roommates. I don't think at that age I would have dreamed of saying I wouldn't have wanted to live by myself in my own apartment at that time. And I think those kind of informal arrangements that government subsidies are very ill-suited to were much more the norm, and that's even more true among youth and young adults who have a history of homelessness. So one of the things that we're doing is applying to the federal government for a cash transfer so that we can get away from like a Section 8 process for that same group. So hopefully we can make some headway on that. So that's our main strategy, and I'll also say that it's been really also such a pleasure in our lived experience stakeholder group to listen to the young adults and really watch them be such great advocates for themselves, and also sad knowing that it's also because they've not had people advocating for them.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. Again, just reiterating, for us not working in silos, when I say us, the agency. So, from DSS, we just recently had a meeting with Commissioner Danshauser over ACS to understand how can we partner and really collaborate for those individuals that are aging out of foster care. What services can we provide to them in a seamlessly manner? If they need to apply for cash assistance or for SNAP, what does that process look like? So we already had an established process where they go to a specific location, but they can also apply online. So just having that dialogue and understanding the processes that we have in place, but always in the end looking for opportunities to break down those barriers once we learn from the individuals with lived experience.
Thank you. I see two questions. So why don't we go first, Patricia, and you'll be next, okay?
Hello, Patricia Hernandez from the Corporation for Supportive Housing. Speaking of populations, CSH released a report that about 2,500 people in Rikers are eligible for supportive housing given their clinical diagnosis, but they often are not eligible to get into supportive housing because of their homeless chronicity issues. Do you guys have a plan to address that population who's extremely vulnerable, and especially with the close of Rikers and all those things? Like, is there a plan for that population in particular?
They're looking at me. So just recently had another meeting with Commissioner Molina to better understand how can we engage the folks that are recently being released from Rikers, because we want to make sure that we set them up for success, right? And what does that discharge planning look like? How can we possibly get them to start a 2010E prior to leaving? Also had a meeting with the state commissioner for corrections. So it's just, again, having that conversation. Y'all know this is, what is it, May 2nd? We only been in office since June 2nd. We only been sitting in these seats since January 1st. So there's a lot of planning that we are doing to address how do we serve New Yorkers with the services that we have. So those conversations are ongoing. Okay, I love to hear your ideas as well.
And very quickly, Beatriz, HPD does work in that space. In fact, last week I was at a ribbon cutting, and we had a partner, for-profit developer, an old church property on Washington Avenue in the South Bronx, the Fortune Society, and the United Methodist City Society, all partnering, senior housing, and it was 150 something units, 154 I think. 57 of the units were dedicated to formerly incarcerated older adults. And the stories that I heard that day, I literally couldn't hold back my tears. One gentleman who was running around the city looking for a place to live was rejected by everybody, and he finally gets a place. And he tells his story, a beautiful person that just got snagged up in a set of bad decisions over time. And now here he is, almost 60 years old, and couldn't find a place to live, and now he has it on Washington Avenue. Beautiful. So we want to do more of that.
Great. Yes, please go ahead. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize he was there. You can go after him.
Yes. Okay, let's do it this way. Hi. I am actually a person in supportive housing, and I belong to a group called Shout, and we're a new organization trying to get supportive housing tenants together to get their rights and make sure that we have our dignity and our ourselves heard, because it's very hard to do that when there's so many levels of blockage, if you will, from supporting housing providers, some of them anyway. So here's my question, right? It's like, and I have to read this because I'm very nervous, as you can tell. All right, so here it is. We are all aware that many of the people who would benefit most from permanent supportive housing are currently unsheltered, living unsheltered, and in shelters, people face direct threats of violence, witness violence due to overcrowding. It's a horrible condition, right? It really sucks, and a lot of you folks know it up close and personal, right? So, and there's no clear incentive or timeline for shelter providers to move people into permanent housing. In many cases, shelters won't even start preparing a housing package until 1 year of residence. The city's position seems to be that people need to enter shelter in order to be housed, but how is this helping anyone to obtain permanent supportive housing? And if you agree that this is a counterproductive approach, what can the Adams administration do to get people directly into supportive housing and fill those vacant units? How do we speed up the process and get people who, there's so many people that hate the idea of going to shelter. You might be sweeping them off the streets, and then what? You're trying to push people into shelters they don't want to go? Or, you can push them out of the subways, but they're going to go right back there about another, 10 minutes later, right? So you can keep pushing people, they're going to keep going back. Now, how do you get people to, get them out of the streets, but you have to guarantee them something decent. And people don't want to go into shelters where it's a dangerous environment. That's pretty basic, and I think all you folks know this, right? So why can't we get people out of that situation into more like safe havens, stabilization beds quicker? How come, it was like so many units have been built, they say. So where are they, and why aren't they being filled?
So why don't we, that's a great question. Why don't we
I'm sorry,
hear, no.
I have a tendency to rant.
No problem. I just want to make sure that they have a chance to answer.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. I think it's a really important one, and it's really the reason why we're so laser focused on this administrative burdens work, because there is no rule that says you can't go from being unsheltered straight into a supportive housing unit. There's no rule that says that. But as a practical matter, it's really, really hard to achieve that with all the various forms of paperwork that we need in order to move you in. So on the one hand, I really, we're working hard to treat homelessness as the emergency that it is and do things faster. And I really need to give a shout out to Gary's team for working so hard on these supportive housing vacancies. And on the other hand, I want to make sure that we're not doing it in this manner that just kind of what I would, from my current personal life thinking it's not like toddlers playing soccer, where we're not just all going to rush over and try to do the same old process as quickly as we can and then lose interest in that process and then rush over when some other priority comes up, that we're actually peeling back the onion and reducing the burdens and reducing the forms and reducing the time that it takes so that the entire system can work well. So that is really the number one priority, and I can't wholeheartedly say I want to build thousands and thousands of new units of supportive housing right now until I know that we really have a system where we can push people through and move people in as quickly as possible. So it is the number one thing, and it's frustrating for every single person in this room, and no one more than someone who's experiencing homelessness, who there's a unit that really needs to be filled, to have a mountain of paperwork standing between you and a home. So I really thank you for asking that question, and it really does motivate all of us on this panel to really stay focused on that.
Does anyone else want to comment?
I just reiterate what Jessica said. We are laser focused. We recognize there are challenges, and we are looking at those challenges to see how do we come to solutions. And the perception is that, all of the shelters are dangerous. And I want to say publicly, our shelter system, as a whole, is not all dangerous. I go out. Thank you. And I visited locations, and I don't just go in, and I make unannounced visits along with the administrator, and I speak with not just the staff there, but I also speak with the clients, because that's who I want to hear from. Want to hear from the staff, right? Want to hear from the folks who are running the shelter system, but I also want to hear directly from the folks who are residing there and understand how long you've been here, what are the challenges, and I hear from them. I looked at some locations. I'm not comfortable moving there. I'm not going to be that commissioner to say, no, you must move there. We want to educate you and get you comfortable with moving to independent living or supportive housing, but I'm not going to force you, because that's not right. And I say we serve with care and compassion. I'm going to serve with care and compassion.
Thank you. And thank you again for your question. We have one more minute. Back there. Yeah. Yes, you please. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen DeBose. I'm part of the team over at WIN, Women in Need. And this is directed toward Commissioner Jenkins. And thanks for coming out to our WIN family shelter, you and Mayor Adams on Mother's Day, so thank you. My question is, what are the numbers for the undocumented as it pertains to that 900? I think that was the number that we moved the needle since April to now. So I think from April to now, you said we moved 900, and I think we got 1,600 vacancies left.
Mm-hmm. We have 1,600 vacancies left.
So about how many of those were undocumented? And I have a twofold question. And what is the timeline for completing the filling of the 1,600 units?
Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry I pointed him out to ask this question.
Tough question, huh?
As we all know, the undocumented we have our challenges, right? Because they have to be eligible for state and federal funding. So that is something that we're working with our state partners in conjunction with our federal partners to see how do we address this specific population. It's not easy. So I'm not going to sit here and go, we're moving out undocumented. That's a work in progress. That it actually is. To close the gap with the 1,600 vacancies, we are, as I said before, we are laser focused on identifying the individuals, having the referral process moved up, so having those folks go to the vacant units. We have now the process, you can do it virtually. You don't have to actually go there. I have my pros and cons on it because I like to see it. I went to a location in Brooklyn on Friday. It was a beautiful building. The unit was, I would move there, right? And that's how I approach. When I go, Gary, would you move here? I would move there. And the units that I've seen since I've been visiting the locations, I would move there. So we have to work on educating our population to say, this is a really good place, and the services that's provided there by you all are outstanding, and I think it would be a good fit for you. So we are really driving to fill those vacancies.
Thank you.
Thank you
thanks
so
for sending
much.
out that brochure, too.
Thank you. And I am sorry, I am going to stop here. I know there's many more questions, but I know there's also lunch and coffee. So please join me first in a big round of applause to our fantastic panel. Thank you all so much for joining us today.